organizational development, sometimes people call it OD, which doesn't sound very good. It sounds more like a drug issue. But the reality of organizational development is you're going to take components that are troublesome in the organization that you want to optimize, and you go through and you examine them in minutia and sit down there and collect data, look at it, get input into it. And then once you sit down and have all that, you come up with different options to improve it. And then finally you implement it and then you watch it. A little bit like the change process. You look at it, you make changes, and then you refreeze it in the new system and measure it there to make sure it's working. For instance, here on groups, I've seen this work numerous times on groups and teams. You actually go through a process of forming them together. You gather the committee. You discuss your charges, what your mission is. You look on the aspect of what you want to accomplish. You then figure out a way to do that. And then you have dialogue in the process. You start creating process. And then that's called storming. Now, storming can be pretty brutal sometimes because people come into a meeting and they have their own personal agenda, and you almost have to discover what that agenda is, and not everybody is transparent until all of a sudden now that they're being touched and you want me to change? Oh, I'm not the problem, they're the problem. Then you get that whole aspect involved, and so you'll see the actually storming, and storming is a real event. And you'll see people cordial, and then till finally all of a sudden they have to sit down there and kick in because of the fact that their area is being threatened. So you have the storming area, and then once you get the hang of it, then the committee goes through a process we call norming. You'll actually go through this process if you watch closely in the forming, storming, norming, and then performing, and then eventually you actually adjourning. It's a whole process. Although if you want to keep the good rhythm going, and the rhyme says joining would be more appropriate. But that being said, that's OD in the aspect of organizational development as to how you deal with teams on a different basis. The purpose is really to organize the performance development of each different area, improve satisfaction, and really adapt the change. Now, once you get everything running clearly and you have the data out there, it's incredible how people, they back off in the process. What can you use it for? Almost any function where you see there's a problem, you just sit down, back up, and do analysis. One time in human resources was being savage because of the fact it takes too long to post a job. So we want to go the whole process to how long it takes. We started measuring, okay, the dean wants to have a new position. Okay, so how long does it take for the dean to sit there and make that decision? Okay, here. And then it takes a process. They have to get approval from the college. So they have to get a signature from the vice president, and then a signature from the president, and then it gets submitted. Wow, that took 5 weeks on average for 42 different requisitions. Okay, so now all of a sudden, then it hits human resources. Human resources, the committee is selected. Who selects the committee? Well, the dean does. What is the process for the dean to select the committee? Well, how long does that take? Well, it takes them about the average of 14 days to form a committee. Okay, so now we're into 8 weeks. Okay, so now you have the committee, HR works in it. They schedule the meetings. They schedule on people's calendars. It depends. HR is ready to go themselves within 10 days, except for the fact that not everybody's available. So really trying to get people together is the biggest thing. By the time we were all done, we put the data out there to a group of people from the colleges, and all of a sudden, well, it's not so much HR, it really is the processes at the campuses. So you look on it, and it's amazing the data you will find, and it is not usually the surface issues that you see, it's the deeper underlying roots, which is really what the purpose of organizational development is looking for. Key components use it for change management. It's a huge tool for that. If you want to create change and streamline things, you pull this tool out and start working on it for change management. Team building, leadership development, it's really good for that because you want to keep the people inside if you can, promote them and try to develop them so they stay longer, and also they know the organization, and also process improvement. You do assessments, you do planning, you do executions, you have this whole process where you assess things, and that really is the main tool of organizational development. You want to provide individual team and organizational performance. You can actually use it for an organization or a component of the organization that is almost dormant and looks like it's in mothballs. Sometimes you can bring those things out, dust them off, run it through organizational development, and all of a sudden something that was in the back corner becomes a shining star. If you have a merger between organizations, two different organizations come together, and you'll see the mergers. All of a sudden now you have the top management competing for who's in charge. And sometimes once one segment gets totally fired in the whole process in a merger, and only one survives. You can't have two CEOs and two chief financial officers, two chief human resource officers, two chief marketing officers. So you have to sit down and decide who's going to do what and how you have it. So sometimes who has the better system, and then you start adapting and using organizational development to measure and assess which is the best process. Sometimes they simply don't work together. There's been cases like that where you saw Heinz ketchup actually merged with another company, and the cultures were almost at odds with each other, and they just continually fought nonstop in the process. So you'll see that. Sometimes the biggest thing, and I mentioned this before, is what is the problem? You have to get to that. Once you define what the problem is, then you sit down and says, well, HR is slow. Well, HR wasn't slow. It was the colleges that were slow, except for the fact it looked like, since HR is handling it, it was all them. By the time we were done, the whole process was taking 19 weeks from beginning to end. Of the 19 weeks, HR only touched 4 of the 19 weeks. The other 15 weeks were actually driven by the college. So what is the problem? The problem is slow, but why is it slow? And then intervention, what will we do about it? Let's do the evaluation. Did it work? And by the time we were all done, we reduced the process down to 7 weeks based upon what the colleges would do. And we'd actually set up a little list and a scorecard to see, so people could see where it's at in the system. All of a sudden now, when it was sitting in somebody's desk for 2 weeks, all of a sudden now they were the focal point, and people can go back and find the problems. And the problem, you knock it off, get this thing signed. So you have that kind of an issue. Multiple interventions sometimes. Management support is critical. If you don't believe in organizational development, it's not going to get supported. Management, upper management needs to sit down and do that. But one of the big things is organizational development is affected by the culture. Culture can always be damaging if it goes up against anything else. So that's where we say culture eats strategy for breakfast. Okay, OD is part of the strategy tool that you use to make change. So make certain that you're adapting organizational development right into the culture, get a lot of input in the process. Diagnosis, intervention, evaluation, feedback. And you do the same continuous loop. You can do the same loop going nonstop for multiple different aspects of it as well. So focus on the organizational process, assess, plan, execute. That's kind of the mantra for organizational development. And then train, and really it's about training and communicating throughout the entire organization, making certain people, our current people, know what's going on and know that they're being looked at in a positive way to sit down there and make their job easier to do and more effective in the process. Organizational development, basically, it's nothing more than a tool set used to tweak the organization to bring it to its finest moments. Take care.